You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is March 13th, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we bring you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us, Susan Shelley, who is Vice President of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and she is also a columnist and an editorial writer for the Southern California News Group. And so we're going to be talking about some of the articles she's written today and issues going on inside those articles. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our guest today, and that's Susan Shelley. We're going to talk today. The big issues we're going to talk about today is a lot of stuff that's going on in California legislation and SCOTUS and its impact on the upcoming election. And we've kind of talked about some of that stuff recently, but we're going to talk about some other topics in there today as well. But before we jump into the topics, let me show you Susan's webpage so that you can know where you can go to find some of her articles. So here is her link to the Los Angeles Daily News, and you can kind of see a list of the articles that she's written. And right at the top there, we're actually going to talk about that one too today. And also to her X page is a good way to find out what's also going on with her as well. So Susan, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything more about, contacting you or anything else before we jump into the topics.
Well, you can always reach me by email at the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, susan@hjta.org.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so we always start now with a Liberty quote. That's pretty much how we kick the show off today, nowadays. And this one kind of fits in well with the first story we're going to talk about. And it's actually one of my favorites. It's Walter Williams. He's an economist. And certainly for those of you who've been a fan of Milton Friedman, or even people who listen to Rush Limbaugh, you'd know who Walter Williams is. He's actually sat in as a guest host for him at times, I think. But
Jason,
yeah,
Walter Williams is deceased, so it's not.
Oh yeah. Walter Williams is deceased, and he passed away a few years ago. But what the quote we have from him today is on the minimum wage, and I love the way Walter Williams always frames things, because it really helps people who are non-economists kind of understand what's going on with an issue. And so on minimum wage, he said, the real problem is that workers are not so much underpaid as they are underskilled, and the real task is to help those people become skilled. Congress cannot do this simply by declaring that as such and such a date, everybody's productive output is now worth $7.25 per hour. This makes about as much sense and does about as much harm as doctors curing patients simply by declaring that they are cured. So I don't know if any of you guys had any thoughts on that, but Walter Williams kind of always hits the nail right on the head, in my opinion.
Black by popular demand. I always used to love that one. I don't know. You can't take that one for yourself, Leon. You got to think of something different, because that's Walter's. That's his thing. So, but that's a great one. Usually governments come along. They have at least they have sense enough that they don't push the envelope too much. They usually come in and declare a new higher minimum wage after this free market has already cleared 99, and I think it's in the neighborhood of 99.7 or 8% of all jobs away from higher than the minimum wage. So and that's just simply market processes. I mean, if you look. And I asked this question once on Facebook back when I used to pose questions about minimum wage and other questions that ironed the sensibilities of certain friends of mine. But that's all that actually received the minimum wage is just some less than a percent of the total number of workers in the United States. So You have to look at people that are making a salary, people that are self-employed, and so on. And when you total all that up, it's just a tiny percentage of actual people that are out there working for a living. So even among wage learners, it's something like 1.3% or something. It's ridiculously low.
I think I saw something on the Bureau of Labor Statistics before that it's like 3 or 4% of people are even impacted directly by it. I mean, there's an indirect hit too as well, but as far as
Right, and that number will be people that are paid, hourly or something like that. It's just a tiny percentage of that. I mean, people paid hourly, for crying out loud. Yeah, and so but people get it's just ridiculous. It's basically being pulled. The horse of the economy is pulling the wage structure of most of these people, and so the minimum wage is really kind of a non-starter, but it's just good. I guess it's good for votes, apparently.
Yeah, always.
well. Okay, so let me just put in my 2 cents worth here. I have to totally disagree with you guys in the sense that yes, your macro analysis is correct. However, for those folks, those body of folks who are looking for their first job, who are trying to get their first set of experience, their first understanding of what it is to get up in the morning or after school to go get a job. The minimum wage has been one of the most destructive things in America for those people, especially for Black people. There was one time when the unemployment rate, listen to what I'm about to say here. It is no joke. You could fact check me and make me a liar. The unemployment rate among Black youth were lower than that of white youth. But since the minimum wage came along, that have disappeared. It is because the minimum wage permits discrimination. So when an employer looks around and he can see here is a white kid, a little kid going to school in the suburbs, and a Black kid going to school in the inner cities of America, who do you think he's going to pick? Because he's forced to pay them the same thing, $15, $5, whatever the minimum wage is. It's just like Walter Williams just said. The government have declared that I'm supposed to pay this person who I don't know nothing about, have no demonstrable skills, but I got to pay them $10 an hour.
Well, Leon, that person might be a robot nowadays.
It might be true. It might be true. But we're talking about history here. We ain't talking about the robot that's going to take over our lives. But I'm telling you, even though your macro analysis is correct, your micro analysis where Black unemployment, especially for teenage unemployment, this minimum wage has been one of the most destructive things we have seen in America where employment is concerned.
Yeah, well, I have to concede that point to Leon because that is an excellent point that I agree on. So in the margins of my macroeconomic, blathering away there, I did falling through the cracks are all those people. Yeah. And so the distortion to the marketplace of the minimum wage takes those people out that really aren't worth any market clearing value per hour, but because they'll work for less than that somewhere where they're basically receiving education or training at the same time they're receiving a job, it leaves those people out. And yes, you're absolutely right. I stand or sit rather corrected.
And I'll go just one little step further, not to push this point too much.
Not to beat a dead horse.
Well, then let's let Susan in eventually.
Yes, let Susan go. I'm sorry, my apologies. Let Susan say something. My apologies.
We forgot.
I'll just say that raising the minimum wage does not create the revenue to pay the minimum wage. So something's got to give. It's either less hiring, or it's they close down the hours, or they close down the restaurant, or something happens. You can't. There's only so much you can sell a hamburger for or a donut before you lose customers. It's a flexible kind of commodity as far as the customer is concerned. You don't need it. You can go do something else with your money. So it's hard for businesses, and it's hard for people to open businesses when the labor costs are so high, because just to get started, you're already losing money every hour. So I think for all those reasons, it has an overall corrosive effect on the economy.
Indeed.
Yeah. I think a lot of times the slick economists who push this kind of stuff, they often try to, talk right around the margins, because obviously if you push them to the extreme, like that one Democrat recently who wanted $50.
Not just one Democrat, a United States Senate candidate.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, most I guess sane economists at least would stay away from numbers like that if they were pushing it, because the jig is up once you push a number that big.
And the other thing that's so frustrating, Gavin Newsom gave an interview and he was defending this higher minimum wage, and he said, "Well, the cost of living is very high, and people need to make more money." The cost of living is high in California because of his idiotic policies, pushing up the cost of energy and everything that uses energy.
Yes.
But instead of fixing that, which would be easy to fix, instead of fixing that, he wants to raise the minimum wage and put people out of business. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and actually, this is a kind of a good segue to the first topic, because it adds to do with Gavin Newsom trying to push up the minimum wage here. And specifically on this one, it's about fast food workers. And so we have a little bit of a video clip that I want to use to intro this. So James, this will be KOL number 1, where they're talking about it. And what kind of give you a sense of what happened, there's a little bit of a scandal, because he said that there was going to be a minimum wage for all fast food workers, but then he gave a special exception to one of his buddies who owned specific types of restaurants. So we'll let the news piece kind of clue you into a little bit of that. So James, can you pull up KOL number 1?
Yeah. This all centers on California's law requiring major fast food chains to pay workers a minimum wage of $20 an hour this April, and a big exemption that was made. Lawmakers passed the FAST Act back in 2022. It set the new wages and established a council to bargain for working conditions on behalf of the state's 500,000 fast food workers. But baked into the legislation was a unique exemption, chains that bake and sell their own bread. And that includes the fast food chain Panera Bread. And tonight, sources tell KCRA3 that the governor pushed for that exemption after negotiations with Greg Flynn, who owns 24 Panera Bread restaurants here in California. According to Bloomberg News, Flynn has been a major Newsom donor, giving $100,000 to Newsom's campaign against the 2021 recall and nearly $65,000 to his 2022 re-election campaign. As for Greg Flynn, the billionaire franchisee, he told KCRA3 as far back as 2022 that if the bill passed, he wasn't sure if his company would survive. He has not responded to the latest report.
I love that picture of Flynn. He looks like a deer caught in the headlight. But the one who's really caught in the headlight is Gavin Newsom. And he is having to answer questions about this right when it looked like he might be jumping out as, a presidential candidate. So, a better thing couldn't happen to him.
Well,
but here...
he's now denying it. He's denying that he ever talked to Flynn. He's denying that Panera Bread is exempt. He's denying everything. But
sure. Well, we actually have Gavin in his own words trying to scramble out of this. So, James, can I have KOL number 2 really quick so that we...
Yeah. This all centers on California's law requiring major fast food chains to pay workers a minimum wage of $20 an hour this April, and a big exemption that was made. Lawmakers passed the FAST Act back in 2022. It set the new wages and established a council to bargain for working conditions on behalf of the state's 500,000 fast food workers. But baked into the legislation was a unique exemption, chains that bake and sell their own bread. And that includes the fast food chain Panera.
There's a provision in this bill that exempts bakeries, essentially places that sell and bake bread on site. So carving out essentially Panera and Boudin. I wonder, why in the agreement did you all decide that those workers should not be within the umbrella of this?
That's part of the sausage making that was part of 257, the original bill, and we went back and forth, and there was part of the negotiation. It's the nature of negotiation. There's a lot of component parts in the industry. It's not just Jack in the Box, not just McDonald's. There are a lot of different players. This affects a lot of different franchisees and different models as it relates to that, and different conditions and environments. And so that was all part of the give and take, and that was the collective wisdom of the legislature, and ultimately led to my signature.
Minority Leader James Gallagher has called for an investigation. Posting online, can any franchisee get an exemption from the $20 minimum wage law, or do they need to donate more than $150,000 to Newsom first?
So James, maybe you can pull up the visual. So this is all about Gavin Newsom's sausage making in California. So, and not very appealing stuff. But anyway, so let's jump to Susan's article. So Susan wrote about this, and she kind of knows a lot more about the insides and outs of how this whole process went and why it's such a murky process doing anything here in California. So Susan, did you want to sort of jump in on?
Sure. Well, first let me explain that there were two bills. There was the original one, which the governor just referred to, AB 257. This was the FAST, F-A-S-T, Fast Food Accountability and Standards something Recovery Act. So the acronym was FAST. As soon as that passed, the fast food industry ran out and qualified a referendum to put it on the ballot so voters could reverse it. It was due to be on the ballot November 2024. But they ran back to the legislature. The union that sponsored this original bill was so angry that there was a referendum. They were so upset about that they pushed through another bill that changed the rules for a referendum. And it said that the proponents of a referendum may withdraw it from the ballot if they choose to, if they make a deal with the legislature for something else. That's what happened. Gavin Newsom signed that September 8th, 2023. 3 weeks later, there was this new bill, AB 1228. Now, that was exactly the same, except the corporations were removed from having any liability. Because in the original bill, the franchisees and the corporations were equally liable for workplace violations, deep pockets to sue everybody. The corporations got their cutout, and the franchisees were left with the $20 an hour minimum wage and this new council, which acts like a union bargaining session without the bargaining. It's a council in the government that runs their wages, working conditions, and standards. So that's how this worked out. Now, how did this negotiation happen? Well, Ashley Zavala, a reporter with KCRA, dug out that there were negotiations run by the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, which pushed for the original bill. They ran the negotiations in the dark, in private, in a back room. And the corporations and the restaurant trade associations were in the room, and they were all required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Now, how does it happen that they're making legislation like this? It was because it was a negotiation over whether the industry would withdraw the referendum. So they negotiated without the franchisees in the room. They carved them up like a turkey. They got what they wanted. They put the legislation through in a matter of days. The governor signed it, I think the 28th of September. It takes effect April 1st. $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food restaurants. The Panera cutout was negotiated at the table when the franchisees weren't in the room. And now everybody denies knowing anything about it. No one will acknowledge who wrote it or when it got in there. Everybody's like, it wasn't me. Even the author of the bill, it wasn't me. Well, you're the author of the bill. Yes, but it wasn't me. And this is what they're doing. And it's because they did secret negotiations to get this referendum taken off the ballot, which is a real disservice.
Well, it sounds like it's part of Gavin's secret 7 herbs and spices of his sausage recipe. He's just not giving it up, I guess.
It's not the legislative process. It's something extra. Than the legislative process is bad enough, and this is worse because this is just completely non-disclosed. It's just private and secret and behind closed doors.
Susan, do you think this is potentially because of the basic monopoly the Democrats have in the legislature, that they can just do this kind of backdoor stuff and get it all, and they don't have to worry about Republicans coming along with it because there's not enough of them?
They don't have enough votes to block a sidewalk. It's true. So yes, the Democrats can do whatever they want. As you know, what they really worry about in the Democratic Party, they have safe seats, but they're not safe from primary challenges. So what they really worry about is the SEIU funding someone who will run against them, because they could do that, because these people are interchangeable. What does it matter? They're just puppets. So someone else will be the puppet if they don't vote the way the SEIU wants. That's pretty much the way it works. And that's a disservice to the people of California.
You know, it's something I wanted to comment on too as well. On this is that it's interesting how legislatures kind of don't stick to the rules that they force the regulatory bodies to do. Because I mean, when a regulatory body has to do something, they actually have to do a public process. That the stuff has to be out there in the open for like a 45-day comment period usually when they push something out there. But with these legislatures, I mean, I remember the famous line from Nancy Pelosi: "We'll find out what's in it after it's passed." And that's. Yeah, that sounds almost like the same thing that's happening here. So,
yeah, well, that can be a very abusive process also, because what happens is the legislature passes targets for something, like targets for reducing greenhouse gases, and then they send it over to CARB, to the California Air Resources Board, and CARB has a staff that goes through this process, which is mostly in the dark, and then they put out their rules. Now, this is just a fait accompli when they start this. So everybody can wait in the parking lot and write their public comments and send them in from their phone, but it doesn't change anything. They're going to do what they're going to do. We just saw that with this so-called clean truck rule. Completely impractical. The trucks don't exist. The charging infrastructure doesn't exist. The grid can't handle it. Well, we have to do it because we have to do it. And the manufacturers, once we mandate it, we're such a big market that the industry will have to step up and invent whatever we need. Well, what this ends up being is very expensive, because then they have to go build things to please regulators. And they're not going to sell, or they're not going to work. And you don't have the grid. So what's going to happen with the charging infrastructure? Well, the California Public Utilities Commission said they'll just have the ratepayers pay for it. Oh, will they? Anybody seen your electric bill in California? And
Yeah,
it's going to go
we were
higher?
talking about that. We were talking about that on the show just recently.
Yeah, like an extra $400 a person.
Yes.
I think PG&E was estimating on average.
And it's going to get worse before it gets better, because they're putting these mandates on. So this is the game they play. The legislature creates targets, and then they have their picture taken in Paris, and then they hand it off to CARB, and CARB pushes this through and puts people out of business. They've put truckers out of business a number of times with their different regulations. An elected body wouldn't do it that way, because they'd have to answer to the voters, but CARB doesn't.
But we also have the mandate for electric cars, which is supposed to kick in for new cars in
2035.
2035. I mean, I don't know what you feel about that. I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, of course, the biggest expense of having an electric car is your second car that you need for when you really need to go someplace. So it's just more than most people can afford. And then if you're charging it at night, you're charging it on natural gas anyway, which seems kind of silly if the point is to get off fossil fuels. The electricity is generated by natural gas and by large hydropower and by nuclear. They want to shut down the nuclear. They want to shut down the gas-fired, and they want to blow up the dams. So what does that leave us with? Solar and wind. Well, no one in Sacramento has realized this yet, but the sun goes down. I'm sorry.
And the wind don't blow all the time.
That's right. And so every night we have to pay for something else to generate electricity. And that's why your bills are so high, because you're paying for the solar and the wind and the offshore wind and all these very expensive things, but you're also paying for natural gas plants, for nuclear plants, for large hydro plants, because you need them both. You need all of it. So that's why it's so expensive here.
Well, keep in mind too
I'd
that
like
this
to see one of those nuclear plants being built in California. Is there one being built right now?
No,
in
I think you're going to have a little bit of a wait.
They're trying not to close down Diablo Canyon right now.
Yeah.
After they've been trying to close down all these nuclear power plants in California for all these years.
That's what's happening.
Well, one thing I wanted to throw in there too is keep in mind that since everything is sort of coming back to the same villain, that whole 2035 was a governor's executive order that
during the emergency, during the COVID emergency.
Exactly. So just so we're aware, it wasn't even the regulatory body that actually dreamed it up.
Well, Jason, it doesn't matter. It came from the environmental gods, so it must be good, right?
We worship the weather.
There we go.
Well, speaking of other problems going on in California as well, homelessness is obviously a big issue to anybody who's been living here. That's pretty obvious. And so for that, we were going to talk about Proposition 1A. And so I'm going to throw this up here, and then we'll have a little bit of video to give people a little bit of background on the homelessness thing. But this was just passed. So this was a proposition excuse me, I'm wrong article again.
Proposition 1 is what it is. It's not one.
There we go. Yeah. So Proposition 1. So that was that was just on the ballot, and this is an article you wrote trying to dissuade people from voting for this. Unfortunately, he didn't reach enough people. But hopefully,
the last I saw, it was still too close to call. Was it called while we were here doing this?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that close. I remember on election night, it was like it seemed like it was around 4 or 5% split, but I guess it's closed up. Wow, so there's still hope.
It's about 50-50. They're within 10,000 as of right now. As I sit here, they're within about 10,000 votes from yes and no, and there's 6 or 7 million ballots that have been counted, and there's another 900,000 yet to be counted. So it may not be over. We'll see.
Rarely do we ever hear good news while the show is going. We're talking about a lot of bad news on the show.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
But I hear a lot of good news when the show is not going.
That's true. That's why we're here. But essentially, Prop 1A was yet another proposition that was out there looking for billions to throw at this homelessness problem. And so, here's an article from CNN that was back from 2023 last year, and they're talking about how 17 billion from 2018 to 2022, and the homelessness problem just grew. And but this isn't anything new to California. Anybody who's been living here has been just seeing this problem grow and grow over time. In fact, this is nothing new for our our villain of the day. Back when he was in San Francisco, he had a 10-year plan that was about almost 15 or 20 years ago that he was talking about. In fact, let's bring up video KOL 3. It's a short video of him talking about it. It's a much longer piece if you want to go check it out, but we've got a short segment where he just sort of describes the plan and how good he feels about it.
The issue of homelessness and panhandling. People come in and visit the city, and inevitably they say it's a beautiful city. My gosh, what are you doing about the issue of panhandling and homelessness? We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless, we better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco. Now, a lot of people across this country have adopted similar plans, but we're very proud of our plan, the robust nature of the plan.
So anyways, you can hear how optimistic he is. By the way, if you're watching us on public access, the conversation will have to end there, but you can come online and catch the rest of this conversation because we're going to keep on talking, and you can find this on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Rumble. So go check that out there along with any of the other conversations we've had as well. So anyways, clearly Gavin was optimistic. In fact, he went on in that video to talk about how they were solving the problem. In San Francisco, they had a whole bunch of numbers that apparently didn't have a whole lot to them because, we've seen this go in a different direction since then. So, James, we have KOL 4, and that actually shows the current status of homelessness in California.
California spends billions of dollars every year to reduce homelessness. Now some lawmakers want to know why it isn't helping. Cal Matters with the story today. The state auditor looking into where all of the money is going, even as the number of unhoused goes up. It's a bipartisan audit. It will be the first of its kind and will look into spending on programs like Project Homekey. They also hope to find out how much money goes to administrative costs versus providing services for people. Since Newsom has taken office, more than $20 billion have been spent to reduce homelessness, but the number of unhoused has grown by a third. A different study found that the $10 billion California spent between 2018 and 2021 helped as many as 570,000 people, but many did not actually get housing. The audit itself will cost $740,000 and is hopefully going to be completed by October.
So clearly, California's 10-year plan under Newsom is doing just splendidly, I guess. This is
clearly the billions of dollars went to tents and tarps.
Yeah.
Apparently. Imagine that. I think we should all vomit on that word, unhoused.
Yeah. Well, James, I have a quick visual to show the current status from the California state auditors on this. And, California currently has 28% of the nation's homeless population and 51% of its unsheltered homeless. So, maybe it's California dreaming. I guess it's great tent weather out here. But anyways, that's what they're talking about there. And they go on to talk about, hey, these are some of the things we have to do, increase accountability. Like, that's going to happen here. It's been 15 or 20 years, but anyways, but that sort of brings us back to this Prop 1 that we were talking about. And so Susan, it's like, does this seem like this is, have any chance of doing any good, or is it just more money down the same hole?
It's more money for the same policies. It's really a terrible measure for a number of reasons. One thing it does is it robs the counties of money that they are currently using for mental health services. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't do a better job, but taking the money away from them is only going to cause them to come to the voters for tax increases. So this is a bad idea. Prop 1 takes more of this millionaire's tax. This was the 2004 Mental Health Services Act. It was Prop 63. It's a 1% income tax on incomes above $1 million. It was supposed to fund new and innovative mental health services at the county level. Prop 1 takes away another 5% of the money and gives it to the state. So they get, instead of getting 95%, the counties get 90%. Then they force the counties to spend 30% of their mental health services money on these Project Home Key housing things. Now, here's the thing about the Project Home Key housing. Nobody who's in it has to stop using drugs. So you charge the taxpayers to build or renovate these things. You give the jobs to union construction workers at the prevailing wage, so they're as expensive as it can possibly be to build. You've taken away the community's opportunity to have any input into where they're located or any other mitigating factors about putting this in neighborhoods where elementary schools are or whatever. People doing drugs in the units at taxpayer expense. This is mandatory on the taxpayers, mandatory on the communities. The only person who's not mandated is the person who's in the housing. They can do whatever they want. That's the housing part. And when the counties are forced to spend 30% of their services funding on that, they lose the matching funds that they get from the federal government for providing health care. So they're losing a lot of money at the county level for current services. And they're going to go to the taxpayers in November for tax increases to replace that. The other part of it is this bond. It's $6.38 billion of borrowed money for a blank check. Normally, when you use bond money, it's for something it's going to be there for 30 years. You know what it is. You can do some oversight. This is just a check that they're giving to, I think it's the California Department of Health, and they're going to make grants to different people to build different facilities. They won't tell us what. They won't tell us where. They won't tell us how many. They won't tell us how long it'll take. Just borrow the money, have the taxpayers pay it back over 30 years. It's going to be $12 billion by the time it's paid back. We don't know what we're getting for it. Now, of the $6.38 billion, $2 billion is going for housing. That's going back into the Project Home Key housing also, where no one's required to stop using drugs or to go into a treatment program or to receive any kind of treatment. It's just like that Project Room Key was during the COVID pandemic. Here's your apartment. The services are down the hall. Call us if you need anything. And the result was tragic. There were a lot of deaths in those hotel rooms from overdoses. so busy protecting everybody's right to kill themselves. This is terrible. This is a really failed policy. And so to borrow money to do it at a time when we already have $80 billion in bond debt, we have a $73 billion budget shortfall, and then they want to do this. There are better solutions for homelessness. This isn't it.
Susan, you sort of touch on to me an overarching problem here. You know, Gavin Newsom in that video you just showed, Jason, said if we're going to solve the homeless problem, we have to solve the housing problem. Okay? That is a mind frame of a disastrous policy. The vast majority of homelessness is caused by one of three problems: drugs, alcohol, and mental disease. And do you see that $20 billion or whatever the figure is that is being spent, and nobody knows where it's going and why the homeless problem is so much increasing? And this is happening all over America, because in every case, they are treating the wrong problem. They think the problem is housing. It is not. The problem is drugs, alcohol, and mental disease. And until they get the mind frame to try to treat those things, we're always going to have this homeless problem, this homeless disaster that we are experiencing right now.
Well, I will. Go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say the governor would say that this is going to do that, but it's really not, because these treatment places are unspecified. We don't know what they are, but supposedly they're going to be for behavioral health, which is their term for substance use. But if we really wanted to treat disease, we should build hospitals, because some people need medical care, either for cleaning up if they're drug addicts and they need help. That should be in a hospital at the beginning. And if they're severely mentally ill, they need hospital care also. And they can't just be on the street till they get arrested and then they're under lock and key in a prison. Oh, that was a fine idea. Let's just wait till they hurt someone or themselves. We'll put them in prison. And that's now the Los Angeles County jail system is the largest mental health institution in America. That's appalling. That's our system. So we should be building hospitals. However, in the 1965 Medicare Act, there's a prohibition on matching funds for mental health care in any facility with more than 16 beds, which is how we got into this situation to begin with. But we can get a waiver from that. California can ask for a waiver, and then we can build hospitals, and then we can get matching funds for the care in the hospitals. So that's part of the solution. It's definitely, we definitely do not have enough beds for mental health care. And all the beds in Prop 1, 11,500, including the housing units where no one has to stop using drugs, 11,150, I think is the number, for $12 billion, including interest. That's just typical government.
Yeah. Well, housing costs too is kind of an issue here as well, because and I know we've kind of talked about that, but when you talked about your major points there, the housing costs, there's so many things that drive up the cost here beyond just union wages. You also have the issues where everybody can have a say when you're going to do something with property in some of these high density areas. So it's like nothing can ever get done. I remember when my grandparents passed away, and my mom was getting ready to sell their house, and then you had people jumping in, the neighbors, to say, oh well, we have to make sure that everybody is okay with this. So like there's a neighborhood committee that's jumping in to figure out if you can sell your home and what it's gonna, like if it's going for some kind of multiplex or something else, then they have to approve that and stuff. And this is like in a midtown type of neighborhood, so it seemed kind of crazy, but there's just so much of this. And I remember when we also had this development as well, where they had a Safeway and they wanted to put a gas station in, and the entire neighborhood said no to the gas station. And maybe that's a slightly different issue, but when everybody has a say on what everybody else wants to do with their property, it's going to slow everything down.
But by the same token, if you're living in a residential neighborhood and the government comes in, what they're doing with Prop 1 is they're taking away that community involvement. And while that may make sense in some circumstances, in the circumstance of bringing in people who are drug addicts into a neighborhood, and then bringing in the drug dealers who are going to supply them, and bringing in the petty thieves who are going to be stealing to get the drugs, it's going to have an impact on the neighborhood. And if you do that in a residential neighborhood where children are walking to school, and all of a sudden you're turning the sidewalks into something else entirely because you've decided that this is the place where you want to put Project Home Key housing, and no one has to quit drugs to live in it. I just think that that's a real conflict. You know, people work their whole lives to buy a single family house in a safe neighborhood for their kids. Is it for the government to come in and say, well, we've decided that you don't have enough extremely low income homeless housing for drug addicts in your neighborhood, which is essentially what they're doing. It's not fair. You don't have enough of this. They're doing this to Beverly Hills right now. It's quite a fight. Everybody's a lawyer, so they're going to have a long fight over that.
But you know, the one difference with that is it's the government that's pushing the project into the neighborhood versus, you know, it's not really a sort of a free market thing where they say, hey, we want to treat, you know, drug addicts in your neighborhood. But yeah, so anyways, let's jump on to the courts. Speaking of just craziness. So one of the things that's been going on, and we've talked about this in some of the recent episodes, and James, maybe you could pull up the Susan's article, but she's talking about critical decisions in 2024 that may impact the elections coming up. And you know, the first issue she talks about in there is a Colorado one, and we did talk about that on the show. And you know, fortunately, the courts have come in and said no, one state cannot make the decision for everybody who's going to be on the ballot. But aside from that, there's some other interesting cases as well. Susan, did you want to jump in and sort of run through what some of those cases are?
Sure. Well, yes, it's, you know, this is going to be a really interesting spring. Before the end of June, they are going to decide presidential immunity. They're going to decide whether the government can censor Americans through third parties on social media. And they're going to decide whether all of these people, there's more than 300 people who they were at the January 6th protest, and their sentences were extended because they were charged with obstructing an official proceeding, corruptly obstructing an official proceeding. And the Supreme Court has decided to hear a case, Fisher versus United States, I think is the name of it, and to decide whether the Justice Department and the courts have been improperly applying this particular law about obstructing an official proceeding to these protesters who were at the Capitol. Because this was related to the Sarbanes-Oxley law. This was about the Enron financial scandal. And this particular clause has been pulled completely out of context. It applied to shredding documents and tampering with witnesses in a white-collar crime investigation. It did not apply to walking through the Capitol and delaying something that Congress was doing for 2 hours. So the fact that the Supreme Court took the case is very significant, because more than 300 people who have had extended sentences for these minor infractions like trespassing, parading, this kind of thing, they're 5 years in prison because they were charged with corruptly obstructing an official proceeding, which has a maximum sentence of 20 years. If the Supreme Court throws that out, then they are all sitting in prison for something that is not a crime. And 2 of the counts against President Trump are the Section 1512 corruptly obstructing an official proceeding. If the Supreme Court says that does not apply, then a lot of these cases just completely disintegrate. So there's that. And then the censorship case was originally known as Missouri versus Biden. This is the thing where they were throttling people on Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube and LinkedIn and Reddit and everywhere. This was coming from the government going through these third parties that were scanning everything on the internet with AI software to find keywords, to find narratives, and then measuring how much they were liked or shared and whether they were becoming viral, and then trying to deplatform people for saying things that were true. Now, the government was doing this, and it's the discovery in this case that has come out, in addition to what was coming out in the Twitter files and other places, convinced a United States district judge to issue an injunction on the 4th of July last year. On the 4th of July, on a holiday, he issued this injunction. I think it was 155 pages of all the stuff they were doing that they couldn't do anymore. And the Biden administration, instead of saying, don't be ridiculous, we're not censoring anybody, they appealed the injunction and they said, not only are we doing this, but we must do this. We have to be able to do this because safety. So it goes to the appeals court, and 3 appeals court judges say, no, this looks like a really severe violation of the First Amendment. You can't do any of this. So does the Biden administration back down? No. They appeal this injunction again to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the U.S. Supreme Court looks at this and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let the injunction stand, but we're going to treat it as a cert petition and we're going to take the case and decide the underlying issue. So that's coming by the end of June. Whether the United States government, through third parties, can censor American speech. This is constitutionally protected speech, not terrorism, criminal threats, anything like that. Constitutionally protected First Amendment speech. The government has been censoring it and defending itself in saying that it must be able to continue doing this. It's the worst First Amendment violation, I would say, in the history of the United States.
And
I can't
would
think
agree.
of one.
Yes.
Yeah, can I jump in real quick, Susan? Did this have anything to do with the whole Ministry of Truth thing that, or I guess the disinformation board?
Disinformation board, yeah.
James,
Yeah.
can you bring up the visual real quick? I meant to pull the video of that so we could hear her singing, but I forgot. She's the one who put it to Broadway music, essentially, her plans on censoring. But just in case you don't remember, this is her. And boy, I tell you, if it wasn't for her and the outrageous song that they were able to, of how she wanted to censor people to supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, if they hadn't have done that, that might have passed. That's what's so alarming, is that that's what really blew it out, is that it was so outrageous.
And really, it's even worse than that, because what she was going to be was just the switchboard. She was going to be the person. They were getting so many takedown and censorship orders from the government, so many requests, so many flags, that the companies like Twitter and Facebook, that, look, we can't answer all of you. It was coming from all over the government. It was coming from the White House, the State Department, the Treasury, the Pentagon, the intelligence services, the FBI. They were all making, it was coming from the states, like in California. Well, we don't like what they said about mail ballots. Take this down. And they were getting all of these requests and they couldn't deal with it. They couldn't get any work done. So they wanted this disinformation board to be like the one place that would route all the requests. That's how bad it was. The disinformation board was just designed to streamline the process. It's horrible what they were doing. And I can't believe that they didn't deny it, that they appealed this injunction instead of slinking off into the night and trying to keep it all secret. So it's all coming out. And the Supreme Court, I think, is going to end it with finality come the end of June.
I really hope so. I tend to agree with that the Supreme Court will rule against the Biden administration and all the government officials involved in this thing. My only problem is that this is such a serious violation of our First Amendment rights, but yet no one will be held accountable. We're going to pay, our tax dollars are paying for the government to defend this madness. And then once the madness is over, no one will be held accountable. That to me is the most frightening thing of all.
No, you're exactly right. No one will be held accountable, but at least we will be able to stop it. And I really think that Liberty Caucus that held up Kevin McCarthy's speakership when he didn't have enough votes and they held him hostage. One of the things they wanted was a weaponization committee to look into what the government has been doing to liberty. And they wanted no limits on the oversight committee to look into all these different things that have been going on, instead of these scoped investigations where you can't go here and you can't go there, no limits. And they got all of that. And I think that was really important for all the chaos that they may have caused to the Republican Party. I think that was really important to get those hearings, to get this evidence. We haven't seen accountability yet, but perhaps we will, because it is all coming out. And then Elon Musk bought Twitter, and that was the best $44 billion anybody ever spent for freedom, because we would really be lost if every single one of the platforms was still censoring and you couldn't get real information anywhere. You couldn't have free speech anywhere.
Yeah.
We would take
scary how close we are getting to Orwell's world. So that's terrible. But I did have a short little video clip because it's about that January 6th case and the state versus I can't remember who
Fisher.
It's Joseph Fisher, and he says something in there that I think is really important on freedom, and that's why I really wanted to play this clip. So James, can you play this just so people know what kind of was happening here? And it's kind of representative of probably a lot of people's stories of January 6th.
A North Cornwall Township police officer is now under arrest by the FBI, charged with numerous offenses for his involvement in the U.S. Capitol attack last month. Fox 43's Victoria Lucas has the latest tonight on his arrest.
The FBI has arrested a Lebanon County police officer, Joseph Fisher, following his involvement in the U.S. Capitol attacks on January 6th. Investigators say Fisher posted several videos of himself at the riot under the Facebook username SV Spindrift. He also sent text messages saying, "I made it inside," received pepper balls and pepper sprayed, along with other information detailing what exactly was happening during the incidents. According to court documents, Fisher has been charged with obstruction of law enforcement during civil order, knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority, along with other criminal offenses. Court documents also state additional video and pictures were also used to identify Fisher, giving probable cause to charge him. So far, Fisher has not expressed remorse for his actions, saying in a conversation with another Facebook user, quote, "I told him if that is the price I have to pay to voice my freedom and liberties, which I was born with and thusly taken away, then it must be the price." The North Cornwall Township Police Department responding to Fisher's arrest, acknowledging the right of free speech and adding, quote, "Neither the
I just thought that was really interesting. And here's a guy, and so many of these people assume that these were people who just were out there for Trump. But what that guy said is, hey, this is about voicing my freedom and my liberties. And, these people were all thrown in jail for ridiculous amounts of time and just had their rights stripped away from them in this thing. So I just thought his case kind of is a little bit interesting. And the way they referred to him in that is, well, he's not, sorry for what he did.
See, that's really creepy. They're hammering people with sentencing because they don't show remorse. They don't think they were wrong. Well, they weren't wrong. They were not wrong. They did have the right to protest. Nobody had the right to go in and break windows and the rest of that. But more will be revealed about whatever that was. And the people who went to hear Trump's speech, the people who went because they thought it was a stolen election, the people who went because it was 2020, we'd all been locked in our house since March, and people lost their minds. And we saw it over the Memorial Day weekend with one side of the spectrum, and in January with the other side of the spectrum. People were very stressed out. And to throw them in jail for First Amendment protests, taking selfies in the Capitol, and then to add this obstruction of Congress charge, which is apparently a real stretch. Interestingly,
well, the funny thing is, Susan, in that list that the news reporter said, that was at the bottom, and she didn't even mention it, and some other stuff.
And some other stuff. So here's what happened there. If I remember correctly, the district court, the lower court judge, the district court judge threw out that charge, and the Department of Justice appealed that to get it put back. That's how that happened. And that was the case that the Supreme Court pulled to itself. That's the one they took up. There were many other cases where the judges said, yeah, fine, check, fine, check, fine. And they all just went along with it. And that's a big problem, too, because you count on the judiciary to hold the government to its box specs, so to speak. Read the Constitution and enforce the Constitution. Rights are rights; they're not options. And in the District of Columbia, they haven't been doing that, and it's been really rough. And then the juries are all anti-Trump, so if you do go to trial, it's like 100% conviction rate. But that's what happened here. A judge said, no, that charge doesn't belong there. That's inappropriate, and the Biden administration appealed and got it put back. So, I mean, they've just been appalling, really. I mean, in terms of the worst thing that's ever been done to liberty in America, I think you have to put a picture of Joe Biden right next to that, because he's been just horrible.
I agree. And he has a henchman at the Justice Department a man who is bitter because he didn't make it to the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland. And that man is doing some of the greatest damage. Well, he's working under Biden's direction or whoever is leading the country. I don't think it's Biden. But that henchman at the Justice Department is creating havoc for our liberties here in America. I mean, it's amazing the different tiers of justice that we are seeing in America today. In 2020, we had Antifa and BLM burning down our cities, attacking federal buildings. They tried to set a building in Portland on fire with people inside. I know. And what happened to them? Nothing. And here we had these people who were protesting. Okay, I'm not going to agree with some of the stuff they did by breaking into the windows and going in the Capitol and do that kind of stuff. I'm not going to agree with that. But they did it. But look at the difference in treatment of these people. Look at the difference. I mean, are we in a constitutional republic where the rule of law matters? Or is that the rule of man? And that man is Merrick Garland at the Justice Department.
And so much of what they're doing is intended to chill free speech ahead
Exactly.
And that is that is one of the most disturbing things. Did you see what they did to Steve Baker, the reporter from The Blaze? So they chased him down for 3 years over nothing. He was reporting in the Capitol as a journalist. He did nothing. They chase him for 3 years. They charge him with misdemeanors. They make arrangements with his attorney for him to turn himself in. And then instead of that, the FBI does this theatrical for the cameras perp walk, where they actually told him to show up in shorts and sandals, the better to humiliate him. He showed up in a business suit. They handcuffed him. They marched him in front of cameras. They held him in custody for several hours. Misdemeanors. Why are they doing that? Because he was a journalist posting things online that called into question the story that there was a pipe bomb or 2 pipe bombs planted by terrorists, by whatever kind of Trump-supporting criminals they want to call them, domestic terrorists. And apparently this is a phony story, and he was reporting it. And he was reporting other things about the January 6th arrests and the incidents that went on there, the various lies that some of the witnesses told in the Oath Keepers trial, I think was a story he was working on. And so they're sending a message. Don't report this. Don't comment. Don't protest. It's almost as if they want to steal the election and they don't want anybody to have the nerve to say anything about it.
Right. Exactly.
Setting a tone before November.
Go sit in solitary confinement pre-trial in Washington, D.C. Be my guest. Go have a protest. I think it's absolutely Soviet. It's like a gulag. It's just so un-American. I mean, this is worse than what Joseph McCarthy did in the 50s.
Well, you know, and I think what's emblematic of all this is that nobody's standing up for Julian Assange too, which is, you know, departure from this story, but it just shows where the media is at. The fact that the bulk of the media is not standing behind that man is insane, and that's where we've been for the last 10 years. So, yeah.
But I mean, the Julian Assange issue is germane here, but the bulk of the media, Jason and Tim and Susan, the bulk of the media takes the line from the government and repeats it to us. Just look at
as reporting.
and call it journalism. Journalism. Just look at the mainstream media. Anytime I want to know what's going on in the Biden administration and what they're saying and that kind of stuff, I'm going to see it as news on ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, or CNN. This is dangerous stuff. These people even calling to censor in the name of misinformation and disinformation. They want to protect us from that. And they're calling for this thing. And these people are supposed to be journalists.
Yeah, the Associated Press had a particularly bad one after the Robert Hur hearing. You know, he was testifying and talking about he was discussing why he wrote the report about President Biden's mishandling of classified documents the way he did, why he said that he was an elderly man with a poor memory. He was explaining why he had declined to prosecute, even though he could have prosecuted. The charges could have been filed. So how did the Associated Press report that? Did they report that Joe Biden mishandled classified documents and Robert Hur chose not to charge him? No. They reported hearing becomes campaign event. It was big. That was the first paragraph in the big headline, is how they bickered, how the Republicans and the Democrats bickered during the hearing. Well, what were they bickering about? Well, you have to go 6 or 7 paragraphs down to even find out what the subject was of the hearing. So that's just running defense for the White House.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when that hearing just absolutely showed lies that Biden was making after the whole thing about what he said in it. Just absolutely astounding.
Right.
But
I mean, if you do the what if it was Trump, if it was Trump, Trump lied. And they make a graphic with music, and they do it. They'd open every hour of the news with it and update.
Oh yeah. Trump's. I remember the one line. Trump's salt shaker is larger than everybody else's salt shaker. They literally have a thing on that. He had an extra scoop of ice cream.
Yes.
That ridiculous story where he grabbed the steering wheel of the car away from the secret.
Yes.
Come on, guys. This is just. And they all fell for it, and they all reported it, and they put it on the front page with pictures. It's just ridiculous. It was ridiculous on its face. It was disputed by 4 o'clock the same afternoon by the Secret Service, but it was all over the papers the next day, and now it's the legend. He grabbed the steering wheel.
Exactly. Steering wheel. But you know what is? I mean, getting back to our many disturbing things here we speak about tonight. You know what is disturbing about all of this? You look at all the things that have happened. The Russia hoax. That story, the grabbing the steering by Trump, and all the other things we could point to. When the truth comes out, the media never ever goes back and say, we are sorry that we reported that story.
You're right about that.
They never do.
Yeah. Kind of shows you where journalism is.
Interestingly, the polls are showing that the American people are getting their news from somewhere else.
Yes.
That's
well, they kind of have to if they don't want to live in clown world.
Clearly there were a whole bunch of Republican candidates who thought that when Donald Trump got indicted the first time, that was going to be the end of his political career, and they were all going to be the next person up. There was a whole list of them.
Yes.
And they were all wrong. They were entirely wrong, because every time he got indicted, he would go up in the polls. Why? Because the American people looked at that and they said, this is bogus. He's been telling us it's a witch hunt all along, and we didn't believe him, but now I think maybe we should believe him. That's what happened.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about this guy who's the biggest threat to our free speech, Joe Biden, and we're near the end of the show, so it's time to go into our Knucklehead Noise Patrol and talk about some of the crazy things that this sort of angry old guy said during the State of the Union. As we jump into that, James, can I get the first KNP number 1 so we can kind of see where Biden was going in the State of the Union?
Oh, get off my lawn! Oh, trespasser! Do you want to be eaten alive? No! Then get out of here!
So, angry old man, get off my lawn. That's kind of what he was yelling at the Republicans. It felt like in there. But actually, he kind of got himself, as he usually does, into some more hot water in it. And we're just going to talk about a few things because there's a boatload of things we could talk about. But one of them is an issue around the border crisis. And so, essentially, let me pull up the visual for this. James, can you pull up the article? So it all stems around Biden's concern about the language he's using to describe people who are illegal migrants. And that's illegal immigrant is actually a term in law, and he used it. And then he was reprimanded by his entire party for using it. But let's show you the clip of him using it so that you kind of know what we're talking about. So, James, this would be KNP 2.
He feels political win. He viewed it as would be a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
So here you have Biden flubbing just about everything. By the way, I left the piece in right before he got into that mess because he was about to get into a different mess. If you notice, he started to drift off to one of those well anyways moments.
Yes.
And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene might have accidentally rescued him from by calling out on the Laken Riley story. But Laken Riley was a nursing student who was killed by an illegal migrant, somebody who came here under Joe Biden's lax border policy, and was somebody who was committing a whole host of crimes, and they terminated in him killing, I believe he raped and killed Laken Riley. And, you know, Biden couldn't even get her name right. And then
she was out for a run in the morning on the University of Georgia campus, like any co-ed in America would be, just out for a run in the morning.
Yes.
He kidnapped her. He stopped her from calling 911. He bashed her skull with a baseball bat. He could have been deported. He could have been detained at multiple points. And instead, he was released into the United States. And Laken Riley lost her life.
Yes.
And Joe Biden is apologizing because he used the term illegal.
Illegal, yes.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Jason, you know, you said she was raped. I'm not sure that's true, you know. I didn't hear that.
I haven't heard that. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I guess I misunderstood when I heard the story before, but
okay.
I thought that's what this assault was leading to, but maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, but yeah. Anyways, but it's crazy though, because this is giving fodder to Trump. I mean, Trump is literally getting, you know, standing ovations coming out on the other side of this at his rallies. And, you know, Biden literally used the State of the Union to do a big advertisement for Trump, it sounds like. But what's even more concerning is that he's still not apologizing for any of this. He's apologizing for using the term illegal, but he's not apologizing to Laken Riley's family for, you know, just botching her name in this whole thing. James, can you play the next KNP clip, because that shows him right after the State of the Union. He was interviewed maybe within a day or so on this issue, and this is what he said. This is
Marjorie
KNP.
Taylor Greene. It was priceless. You feigned shock at seeing her. But during your response to her heckling of you, you used the word illegal when talking about the man who allegedly killed Laken Riley.
An undocumented person. And I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented. And look, when I spoke about the difference between Trump and me, one of the things I talked about on the border was that the way he talks about vermin, the way he talks about these people polluting the blood. I talked about what I'm not going to do, what I won't do. I'm not going to treat any of these people with disrespect. Look, they built the country. The reason our economy is growing. We have to control the border and more orderly flow, but I don't share his view at all.
So you regret using that word?
Yes.
So there he is. And James, can you bring up the visual real quick? Because I just want to make it real clear that illegal alien is actually a legal term here. So this is Cato Institute. They had an article in 2019 where they went over this, and illegal alien is just one of many legal terms. And here it is in the code. It's Title 8, 1252C, and it says authorizing state and local law enforcement officials to arrest and detain certain illegal aliens, and then it goes on to describe what those are. So this is a legal term, and he's apologizing for using the actual legal language here. So, anyways, kick this back to you guys here.
Vote you signaling to alleged killers. You know, this is what the Democrats do. They vote you signal to everybody, whether it's blacks, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's killers of young girls. We're gonna vote you signal to all of them. We're gonna feel sorry for calling somebody by a name and not worry about the poor girl who suffered at the hands of this brutal piece of crap. God help us in America when we have people like Joe Biden supposedly leading this country.
Well, the pendulum swings. That's all I can say.
Oh, that's good. Good way to end it, because at least it's on an upbeat, assuming the pendulum's going back the other direction here one of these days, because otherwise I'll just continue to be my cynical self and, rather not say anything if I can't say anything nice. So there you have it.
No, Tim, we got to speak and we got to keep on speaking, right? Otherwise, they're going to all take it away, right?
Well, yeah, that's true to a certain extent. Although I don't expect me to blabber on anything on Facebook like Jason does. I'm not gonna do that. I might go into hiding, as a matter of fact. I can't even stand to read some of this stuff. But anyway.
Well, one of the things I did want to mention too is that Joe Biden's not alone in the way he does this with the language. It is something common to his party, and we've seen our Governor Newsom do it, who we've been talking about all along, and the mayor of Chicago as well do this. But it's just a little clip, just in case for those of you who don't remember. This is essentially Newsom doing something very similar. These people can't even describe criminals as criminals. They have to use flowery language to describe them, which makes you wonder, whose side are these guys on? James, can you play KNP number 4 real quick?
Mark my words, this is not one-off. This is organized theft. These are organized gangs of people that are coming out, and forgive me for saying gangs. I know that's not a pejorative. They're organized groups of folks that move from site to site. When there's more attention, a bright light on one site, they move to the next site. A lot of these folks are arrested as if they're individuals that are not connected to the whole. And we need to change that.
He can't even call organized crime or gangs of thieves.
Organized groups of folks. They have guitars. They do folk music. They do folk dances. They're organized groups of folks. Square dancing sometimes. It's lovely.
Yeah.
They're a lovely group of people, and we don't mean to disparage them.
Yeah, is that how they refer to Republicans when they're out demonstrating against
not organized groups?
No, they call everybody Hitler.
Yeah.
It's organized groups of Hitler.
Of Hitlers, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, remember, Larry Elder was the blackface of white supremacy.
Imagine that. One day I'll be so honored for that. They may call me the same thing. The point is, though, we were talking earlier on about the use of language, okay? Unhoused. When we talk about homeless people who struggle with drugs and alcohol and mental disease, unhoused. Look at all this environmental crap that's going on in the state, okay? Renewable energy, green energy, all these nice, wonderful words that they use to try to suck us in to their disaster. A bunch of virtue signaling that will lead us nowhere. They always attack the language. Even look at this DEI stuff. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Who gonna be against that? Until you find out the disaster that they are proposing. The language is the thing they are trying to control, and they're trying to make us use their language and debate them on their terms.
Well, yeah, it's just dishonesty knows no end with these people. But, I did want to end on kind of a lighter note, and this one was kind of a heavier thing. But there was one thing that was absolutely hysterical that Joe Biden did during the State of the Union. And it takes us right back to a topic we had where we talked with Cecil Bohannon on the show about shrinkflation. And he brought that up again, too, as well. And he got himself into some hot water with that one. So, James, can you bring up KNP number 5 real quick?
Too many corporations raise prices to pad their profits, charging more and more for less and less. That's why we're cracking down on corporations that engage in price gouging and deceptive pricing, from food to healthcare to housing. In fact, the snack companies think you won't notice if they change the size of the bag and put a hell of a lot fewer, same size bag, put fewer chips in it. No, I'm not joking. It's called shrinkflation. You probably all saw that commercial on Snickers bars. you get charged the same amount, and you got about, I don't know, 10% fewer Snickers in it.
So not only have we debunked the whole shrinkflation on the show as look, I mean, that's a consequence of inflation. If the producer's costs go up, it's either going to result in a smaller product or a more, expensive product for the same price. But the bigger issue is, and James, can you bring up the visual here? Snickers, the Mars company, is saying that Biden lied. They have not actually shrunk the size of their product. And this was the actual statement they had down here. We have not reduced the size of Snickers or singles or share size in the U.S. Like many industries, we continue to face high inflation and spikes in material costs. However, we work to absorb blah, blah, blah. But the point is that, this guy is, if he's breathing, he's lying. That's pretty much what we're finding out about him. You guys have any last thoughts on this before we wrap up?
I just think everybody should watch, because somebody's going to want to merge one day. Two of these companies are going to want to merge, and Congress is going to have hearings on it, and they're going to go all through this stuff. It's a bad idea for the government to start attacking corporations by name this way. It's a very threatening thing to do. It's not benign. And I think we should, as defenders of liberty, we should be vigilant against this kind of bullying of American entrepreneurs and American corporations.
Yeah, speaking of which, just curious, Susan, could they actually sue Biden? I hadn't even thought about that, but I mean, he literally libeled them in that statement.
Well, wouldn't it be hilarious if Biden said, "I have presidential immunity"? That would be, that'd be fun. I'll go to court.
I don't think Biden could be sued for making a statement like during the State of the Union and stuff like that. This was in his capacity as president, so I doubt he could be sued.
Well, what if he has diminished capacity?
Oh. Susan, I didn't think about that, but I can't answer that. I'm not a lawyer. I only play one on TV. Okay, so please give me. But Joe Biden, we know Joe Biden is not running the country. Okay, so you gotta forgive him a little bit for making that statement. Somebody told him to say that. Okay, so forgive him.
No. I will not.
I don't know.
Well, no, he's going after Halloween candy. That's the last front. That's it. I'm sorry. That's where we have to make our stand for Halloween candy. We can't allow the government to crack down on Halloween candy. No.
Well, Tim, did you have any final thoughts? Because I think we're about ready to throw it down.
I'm still thinking. I want to retract some of the things I said about the minimum wage after Susan and Leon had their way with me. So now I'm still back in the past. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, Biden will do that to you. But anyways, you spent another show with us. Thanks so much for joining. Again, if you want to check out some of Susan's work, you can go to Los Angeles Daily News. I think it's called thedailynews.com is the website. And she also has a page on X. And James, maybe you could bring these up real quick so people can see them again. Or maybe Leon, you could bring them up. So there's the one page, and there's her X page, and you can keep up with what she's doing because she's putting out at least 1 or 2 articles every week, I think. So lots going on. Did you have any final things you wanted to leave the audience with, Susan?
I don't think so. Just everybody should be sure to vote. If you vote in California and they didn't count your ballot, you can maybe call them up and see if your signature didn't match. You still have time to cure your signature and get your no on Prop 1 vote counted if you voted no on Prop 1 and your ballot wasn't counted.
Okay. Well, it sounds like good advice. And if you're watching us until the next show, next week we have Dwayne Lester coming on from America for Prosperity. So we'll be talking with him. And until then, think about what you can do in your neighborhood or your region. If there's some idea you have that could help to promote liberty and move the ball forward. You see us interview a lot of people who are running for office or people like Shelley who are writing about liberty issues. If there's something that that you think you can do in your neighborhood, start getting going on it. And who knows, you could call us in check on our Facebook and we can bring you on the show and you can tell us all about it. But we certainly need everybody pulling for liberty right now. So thanks again. And you can check out our shows on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Until next week, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.